Can you imagine a system so broken that the very people hired to protect you were often just working for the highest bidder or for the politicians who handed them the job? Well, for decades, that was the reality of American policing, until one person's vision came along and completely rewrote the rulebook. All right, let's get into it. Now, really, just stop and think about that for a second. The officer on your street, they're not there because they're skilled or trained or have any real dedication to justice. Nope. They're there because they know a guy, a local politician. That was the actual system. And, it was a system just begging to fail. So to really get why what came next was such a revolution, we first have to understand what it was replacing. We're going to take a look back at what historians call the political era of policing. This image, it really sets the scene, doesn't it? We're talking late 19th, early 20th centuries. Cities are exploding in size, and so are their police forces. But these officers, they weren't public servants like we think of them today. A lot of the time, they were basically just the muscle for powerful and, frankly, very corrupt political machines. And this right here breaks down the core problems. See, officers were appointed directly by politicians. That meant their first loyalty wasn't to the public, it was to the party. And that, of course, led to just rampant corruption. Turning a blind eye to an illegal saloon for a payoff, all in a day's work. Hiring was all about political favors, not skill. So naturally, public trust was at rock bottom. But out of this completely broken system, a new idea started to take hold. The idea that maybe, just maybe, policing could be a real profession, not just a political handout. And this, my friends, was the dawn of the professional era. And the one person at the absolute center of this massive shift was August Vollmer. Now, this guy is not just some footnote in a history book. There's a very good reason he's called the father of modern policing. He saw all the corruption, all the inefficiency, and he decided to do something pretty radical about it. This quote right here gets to the very heart of his philosophy. It was a complete game changer. He believed that to actually fight crime, you couldn't just react to it with brute force. You had to understand why it was happening, its social and psychological roots. Before him, policing was all about brawn. Vollmer came in and said, no, it needs to be about brains too. We need to understand communities to stop crime before it even starts. Just a massive shift in thinking. And look, Vollmer's ideas weren't just theories he talked about. He put them into practice by dragging science and technology into a field that, up until then, had pretty much just relied on a nightstick and a hunch. So how'd he do it? Well, he took some really concrete steps. He brought in the first fingerprinting system, which for the first time gave police a reliable way to identify who was who. He was a pioneer in using criminalistics, what we call forensic science today, to actually analyze evidence. And he kept pushing the idea of using psychology and sociology to understand why criminals did what they did. This was a huge leap from guesswork to actual evidence-based investigation. But Vollmer's innovations weren't all just happening in a lab somewhere. He also completely changed how police operated out on the streets, day to day. And this comparison just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you have the classic officer walking the beat, limited range, slow to respond. And on the right, Vollmer's big idea, the motorized patrol. This wasn't just about making things easier for the cops. It was a total strategic game changer. Think about it. With cars, suddenly officers could patrol huge areas, not just a few city blocks. Response times to emergencies, they were slashed. And it allowed police to be proactive. Instead of just waiting for a crime to happen, they could establish a visible presence all over the city, hopefully stopping criminals before they even started. So when you put all these changes together, what do you get? Well, it was nothing less than the creation of a whole new standard for what it even meant to be a police officer. This chart just lays it all out, side by side. The system went from hiring buddies of politicians to hiring based on merit, thanks to reforms like the Pendleton Act. That meant you had to pass a test to prove you were actually qualified. It went from rampant corruption to science-based investigations, and it moved from a slow, reactive force to one that was proactive and mobile. In a nutshell, that is the Vollmer legacy. But he wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. He was a huge advocate for education, constantly pushing for departments to hire college-educated recruits. He helped create the country's very first criminal justice degree program. He even started the first juvenile division because he recognized that young offenders needed a totally different approach. See, he wasn't just trying to reform a department, he was trying to build an entire profession from the ground up. So, Vollmer saw the tools of his time, the car, the fingerprint, the new sciences, and he used them to build a modern police force. And that, of course, brings us to a really important question for today. When you look at our world with AI, big data, and all kinds of new ways to engage with communities, what are the tools that are going to drive the next great transformation in policing? That's the question Vollmer's legacy really leaves for all of us to think about.